Okay, so we're at our next destination, which is Coffman Cemetery, which is less than like a mile away. But in certain circumstances, we'll have an idea of where a cemetery is. We don't actually have specific instructions. We'll know that it's off a specific road, and that's kind of what happened here. We found Brant Road, and we knew it was off this road, but we didn't really sure where. And in between, we take a look at really important tools of the trade, which is guacamole and chips. That was my lunch as we drove between the two. So anyway, Wendy got really excited because this was a very old cemetery. Looking over here, I can see a zinc almost immediately right there. And you can see that there's quite a lot of open space here in this cemetery, but that usually means that there were a lot of lost headstones. So, excuse me, I'm gonna take a look at it and come back to you and let you know what we find.
Yeah, this is like early 1800s.
Early 1800s, yeah. So we'll take a look at some of the things here. Oh yeah, there's an 1829 right here. So this one, we were just talking about this one. We think this one might have actually just been field stone rather than something that was made or carved for somebody. A lot of times if people didn't have money, they would come and they would buy, or they would find a field stone.
Well, not only money, but there may not have been a carver that moved into the area yet.
Okay, like she said, so I don't know if you could hear that, but essentially one of the issues may not necessarily have just been money, but there may not actually have been a carver in the area to get an actual stone. So sometimes that was the case. Take a look over here really quick. There's actually some really beautiful stuff here. This is a really nice one. You see the weeping willows really frequently, and several stones have the same willow pattern, which generally means the same carver. And actually, it's this guy right here, made by W.J. I don't know if I'm even putting everything. Jungkurth in Lithopolis, Ohio. So this is a really beautiful stone, and I'm actually, I was gonna say, and actually this has been recarved. You took the words right out of my mouth. But there's a couple here with this guy's name on them. He was obviously extremely popular in this area, and 1829 is actually really, really early for this area too.
Yeah, it was the Wild West at that time. This was the pioneer.
Yep. So when you talk about, you know, time frames, you tend to see more the 17th century or the early 1700s, you know, the further you go towards the East Coast. I mean, it only makes sense because that's where they came in, and then they tended to shift west across the United States. And so as you get further west, you see, you know, later dates and times when people had passed away. So this is actually extremely early for our area. A little bit. So another common piece of imagery that you see a lot of times are these books. They're really neat. Usually I think it's supposed to be the Bible. They usually have some scripture on them. We were kind of just talking about some of the stones we see here. So you see this big line here. And honestly, this is probably not where most of these stones used to live. As a matter of fact, I was just showing you that stone over there that I thought was recarved. This is his wife's stone right here. Chances are this stone was actually probably over there by his, but you know, ease of mowing for the township, probably they just went ahead and lined everything up. A lot of these are foot stones, so they wouldn't be in a row like this.
Look how crammed those are.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. See how crammed all of these are? I mean, there's no way that these people are buried here like this. So generally these were spread out, and in an effort to preserve them, I guess they brought them and lined them up like this, which I guess I don't know. The jury's out on how I feel about this idea, but you know, here it is. And then I wanted to show this one. This is the first one I saw, if I can figure out how to do this without looking at the screen. This is that same carver that we saw over there on the other one. And here you can see some of this has been recarved with a
and I don't know
with a Dremel.
Would have been originally how they would have done it. I've never seen a carver
at the top like that. Yeah. It probably was at the bottom, and again, in an effort to preserve it, it was here. So, yep, choices were made, and kind of unfortunate. And I'm not sure this stone was ever really finished, because a lot of times in these corners, let me see if I can actually get my phone lined up, you see pinwheels or other things, columns, that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of stuff that has been recarved here. God, I'm doing terrible with the phone here. There's been a lot of stuff that's been recarved, so there's somebody that's paying attention to these, and they're within a certain area. So Wendy's over here taking a picture of a tree, and you just missed a fun dance. We're going to talk a little bit about something we just found, something that was her theory about this particular cemetery, and we were correct, or she was correct. I don't know. So anyway, here we have, let me see if I can get this stone in properly. This is a Revolutionary War hero. I'm gonna let Wendy talk a little bit about what she was telling me and her theory about the area.
Yeah, so when we got out and were looking, given the era of the graveyard, and one of the ways we could tell the era was by the stones, because it's largely sandstone, and those were used up until about the 1830s, 1840s, and they switched over to marble. But I told her when we were over there, I said, there's got to be a Revolutionary War veteran buried somewhere in this cemetery, because the reason why so many people decided to settle in Ohio during this time period was that Revolutionary War soldiers were paid with land in Ohio. They weren't given cash. They were like, hey, you can have some acreage way out in the middle of nowhere where there's absolutely nothing. And a lot of the guys sold their interest to land brokers, but some of them packed up their families and came. And this Adam Kitzmiller is one of the ones that came. He probably established the little village here, or was part of it. And, you know, town thrived here.
Yep. And we're just one day, was yesterday no, Monday. It's Friday, whatever. It all blends together. But just a few weeks, same week of Veterans Day, so I guess that's kind of appropriate. And again, this is another thing that, you know, this leads us to a story. So we'll probably go home and take a look at this guy and see if he has anything specific, any specific stories about him, and maybe write something up on him if we can find it. So anyway, very cool. Cute little cemetery. Cute? I don't know. Nice little cemetery that we found here. A lot of old stones and really neat stuff. So, cool. So this video isn't done yet because there is a zinc up here in the corner. And it looks really nice. Haven't really looked at it too much here. Let me get myself in order. So, another child. Usually when you see a lamb and a cherub like that, it's a child, which is pretty
17-year-old.
So there's a 17-year-old, this is an 11-month-old, and 17 days old, and let's see, this is 17-year-old. So you can see that, you know, this family had a hard time. A lot of their 3 children dead. With it, see, 1881, 77, and 73. So, I mean, it wasn't wham bam, but it certainly wasn't probably a nice thing, and that was the reality of the time, that a lot of kids didn't make it to adulthood. So and that's one of the other reasons why we chose to do our Babyland project, is to honor some of those children and try to get their graves back in a good place so that they can continue on for another 100 years or so, maybe longer. So back in the car, and we're on to our next cemetery, which is Old Betzer Cemetery on Pickerington Road. Looks like we have a couple here on Pickerington Road, but there's Allspock Cemetery, which is maybe in private property, described as in a barnyard. Don't know if we're going to be able to see that one. Or we might trespass today. We'll find out. Stay tuned.
Have bail money ready.